So let me start by introducing myself. I'm Tim Hewitt. I lead the executive search group in Canada with LHH Knightsbridge. So with that, I know you all appreciate the weather we arranged for today. This is such a spectacular location and so much better when there isn't fog. So really glad everyone could join us here. I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge today that the event takes place on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is governed by Treaty 13. We honor the Indigenous people who were here before us and cared for the land. And now I would like to introduce my friend Kim. It's so much fun. You will notice that we dressed in a coordinated fashion for today's event. It's important that you make note of that with Kim. She loves that. I wore the same thing. So, on a much more serious note, as you may well know, Kim's the Senior Vice President of Career Development and Transition within LHH. She has 25 years of experience specializing on career development, leadership coaching, and engagement. She's a recognized thought leader and speaker on career management engagement, and is also on the board of Dress for Success. So Kim, come on up, and I'd also like to have the panelists come up and join her. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for the introduction, Tim. He did call me this morning to make sure we dressed alike. So I'd like to get going and talk a little bit about what we're on the conversation with the panelists today. Today's discussion will focus on clear reality. What made leaders and employees successful, even 6 years ago, has drastically changed and not coming back. Since 2020, we've navigated a global pandemic, geopolitical conflict, tariffs, trade uncertainty, sustained market volatility, and now the rapid acceleration of AI. Wow, that's a lot to go through. That's compounded and made it even more difficult and see how we operate organizations today. The result is this: we no longer operating in cycles of stability disrupted by change. We are operating in permanent uncertainty, and many leadership systems were never designed for this. LHH has created a little bit of research, and I'll share a few of those stats today as I open up for our esteemed panelist. AI and emerging technology are now the #1 perceived leadership gap, jumping 7 spots just in 1 year. Yet only 51% of leaders feel confident in their organization's AI capability. And just 10% of organizations are considered future ready in how they align talent, strategy, and technology. 10%. That tells us something really important. The issue isn't that leaders lack ability or intent. Think about ChatGPT. It started at the end of 2022. No one has decades of experience in this particular space. We're harnessing the power of this transformational technology in real time. But it's not just about AI, as we've just mentioned, all the different disruptions in our workplace. The one important piece I think is really important to think about is, what is the clarity that we need? Strategic clarity, slow decision-making are the biggest barriers that we're seeing in executives in today's environment. Leadership effectiveness is less about having the right answer and more about the ability to make decisions, prioritize, and move despite ambiguity. At the same time, the landscape is changing. People, employees, leaders want different things in their careers, in growth. So all of this is unfolding with all the economic constraints, which brings us to today's conversation. The panel discussion isn't about redefining old playbooks, about questioning what no longer holds, and what leadership must look like now, leading through uncertainty, but building trust and making decisions when stability is no longer guaranteed. Which turns me to our wonderful panelists. So I'm going to introduce Liz first. Liz McSavaney is SVP and Chief People Officer for Zurich, Canada, with more than 25 years of experience leading enterprise change and shaping people strategies across insurance, consumer goods, technology-enabled organizations, and government. Known for driving complex transformation and simplifying execution, she brings a pragmatic, business-first approach to aligning talent, leadership, culture with measurable business outcomes. At Zurich, Canada, Liz leads the country's people strategy and HR transformation agenda, focused on modernizing the HR operating model and embedding AI-enabled, data-driven decision-making. Frequent speaker at HR transformation with the Pinball Clemens Foundation, supporting education, opportunity for youth from marginalized communities. Thank you. Sudha Dwivedi is the group head, people and culture at Interac Group, where she leads culture transformation and talent strategy to drive strong business outcomes and strategy and innovative HR executive. She is known for translating organizational vision into impactful programs which enhance performance, engagement, and long-term growth across the financial, technology, and medical services sector. Recognized as one of Canada's top 100 professionals, Sudha brings deep expertise in talent management, organizational development, M&A, integration, and enterprise-wide transformation, and a passionate champion of DE&I. Sally Ann Ottinger. She is managing consultant in HR and talent advisory with us at LHH, where she partners with senior leaders to shape the future of work through leadership, culture, organizational transformation. She brings a unique blend of consulting from Accenture and industry experience, helping organizations navigate complex change while building the capabilities needed to thrive in an evolving workplace. Sally Ann has spent her career exploring how shifts in business, technology, and human expectations are redefining how we work, what people need to succeed. She's advised Fortune 500 companies, high-growth organizations, global NGOs on leadership, alignment, talent strategy, large-scale transformation, translating ambitious strategies, also practical people-centered solutions, and real drive solutions. Last but not least, Geoff Brockway is the global head of learning and development for AstraZeneca's oncology RD organization based in Mississauga. He leads a team supporting over 10,000 employees across research, clinical, and operational roles with 30-plus years in life sciences. Geoff's expertise covers leadership, organizational development, transformation, analytics, communications, talent acquisition. In 2025, his team and their collaborators launched a global learning program with more than 15,000 participants, earning global award recognition. Currently, Geoff drives initiatives to align with AstraZeneca's ambitious 2030 strategy, helping identify skills gaps, tailoring learning solutions to support employees' growth and development. Welcome. Wow, we've got a wealth of talent and capability on this panel today. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. And I'm going to kick it off. The first question we're going to get into is, in a world of permanent volatility, what outdated leadership behaviors or cultural norms do you believe organizations back the most? And I'm going to start with Sudha to respond to that question. I'm going to turn on your mic.
Is this on? Okay.
There you go.
Okay, I didn't know I was going first, but thanks for that, Kim, and hi everyone. Good morning. Wow. So I think we kind of all know what's outdated, right? I'm preaching to the converted here. Command and control, blah blah blah. We know that that's a way of the past. And as you said, look, leadership, it's always been tested, but this is a time where it's being tested even more so, right? With the geopolitical situation, with the AI transformation, and quite frankly, as leaders, we are learning to drive a car and teaching people to drive at the same time. The amount of pressure that's on all of us is immense. So, when I think about, what capabilities, I'll shift it to the positive side instead of what's outdated, what actually we're looking for in leadership today. And there are so many important capabilities, but I will just focus on what I would say is my top three, and perhaps yours as well. And the first, which I'm sure is not unknown to all of you, is a human-centered trust foundation that needs to be built. Again, with all the changes going on in the world, people look to leaders for safety and security. And when you're going through change in your organization, you can't stand up at a town hall and say, hey, trust me, everyone, things are going to be okay. Because there hasn't been those moments that matter throughout the year where you're checking in with your people, whether that's formal one-on-ones, skip levels, or just hallway conversations saying, hey, how's your mom doing, right? That's how you build a trust every single day. And that's, so important for us because we talk about psychological safety, which is so important, but that's an outcome of trust. And you can't go through any change without that as a foundation. So that is the first and foremost capability that I think is needed in leadership. And it's not new. We've always needed it. It's just at the forefront even more so today. The second I'll talk about is what you said earlier, Kim, about learning agility and the agility of leaders to be able to change and make decisions without all of the information. And we're used to that, right? Give me all the facts. What does the data say? Now I'll make my decision. We don't have that luxury anymore. Again, we're driving a car and learning how to drive and teaching it at the same time. So that agility to be able to make decisions with minimal information, MVP, minimal viable product, how do I move forward, and allow that space for creative decisions to be made, allow the space for mistakes to be made. And again, if you build that foundation of trust, that's okay. So as leaders, we've got to go with the information that we have and then move forward. And then the third one I'll land on is what I think is really critical for any leader at any level, but more so at the organizational level that we are all in when you're a leader of organization, is the enterprise mindset. All of us are a leader of a function, but when you're a leader of organization, you've got to make decisions that are best for the entire company, not just for the function that you lead. And what I'll say that we do at Interac Corporation with my executive team, we spend a lot of time off-site, just the executive team, building on the relationship that we have. Because everyone's needs are different, everyone's portfolio is different, and everybody needs and wants and whatever they have to accomplish are different. But if we don't build that cohesion as a team, it's very difficult to make decisions that are organization-wide, that you're not thinking in a silo. So again, I would say that you build a foundation on trust, learning agility, make the decisions with the information you have, because the world is moving fast, and then work on the enterprise mindset. And you can only do that when you build your foundation of it as a team.
Thanks, Sudha.
Sure.
Very good. Geoff, would you like to add to that?
Test? You can hear me? You stole all my stuff.
Great minds, baby.
Sudha and I used to work together years ago, so great minds think alike. And thank you as well to LHH for doing this. I think for me, to have this opportunity to not only share some of the things that we're working on or some of the stuff that we've experienced, but also hear from the audience. Can't wait for the Q&A component. I learned a lot in that setting as well. I cheated a bit, took some notes, but the things that sort of stand out to me are things like individual-centric leadership. So that can be something that we can hopefully get away with. You mentioned command and control. How can we push decisions down into the organization and empower our people cross-functionally to be more involved in that decision-making? We'll talk a lot, I think, in this session about pace. And you mentioned it, agility, learning agility for sure, but other types of agility in the business. And I know for us, that's one of the things that we're spending a lot of time on in terms of focus. Consensus as default, I think, is something that we've experienced in business over the years. And I've been in AstraZeneca, as Kim said, for a long time. And I think I've seen that evolution, right? Where, you're in meetings, we're looking for consensus, and things stall. So now it's about, I'm going to disagree, but I'm going to commit to the decision and support the direction that we're heading in. And we've tried to really practice that, and certainly in my role, help to coach and train our leaders on that element. It's taken a while because some of those habits are embedded, but I think we're moving on the right track. And the third thing I would say is something we talk a lot about, which is, and again, this is a fault I think in business today, is perfectionism over progress. And so, how can we not do that? How can we be satisfied with 80% so that the train keeps moving? And I think for us, we do a lot of work in that area to help people understand that, mistakes are part of the business. If you don't make mistakes as you're doing things, you're probably not pushing hard enough, right? And as we know, as I know in my world, that's where the greatest learning happens, is when we fail. So we're really trying to do a lot to encourage that.
Thank you. And would you say that accepting failure is more of a cultural shift in your norms if you're letting it happen where it wasn't happening before?
Yeah, and I would say we still got ways to go, right? Like any big organization, especially in healthcare, right? There's such a regulated environment that we do want it to be as close to perfect as it can be, but also we're in discovery. We're looking at new medicines. I mean, the area I work in, we talk about all the time. We're literally looking for and about to find the cure for cancer. Like that is.
That's
if there's
fantastic.
nothing more purposeful than that, that's it. And so that's how we position it. If you guys can think about pushing the envelope and not being afraid to fail, right? And learning from that failure and sharing that failure, then that's going to get us there sooner.
Thank you, Geoff. I'm going to move on to the next question because I think that's kind of related to one of the skills I think we need for our current reality. So what are the most effective ways you've seen organizations develop resilience? Not as a buzzword, catch-all, but as a measurable capability. I'm actually going to turn this over to Sally Ann.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, panelists. Already I can see some themes emerging that we're going to keep coming back to, I think, throughout this morning. So resilience, resilience is one of those buzzwords, as you called it, and it really became part of the workforce conversation, when was it, maybe 10 years ago? When the World Health Organization declared burnout, a diagnosable condition. And at that time, I think, the focus for all of us was on helping individuals build resilience, right? Helping our employees, ourselves, our teams, be more resilient workers, humans. Since then, I think the thinking has evolved, and we've learned that just building individual resilience is really like an inadequate approach. It's part of the equation. But now I think the shift is more toward building resilient organizations and resilient teams. This is such an interesting topic to me because when I was at IBM, my team spearheaded an enterprise-wide approach to building resilience. And we did a ton of work up front to really understand what that meant. It can feel pretty amorphous. Some of the insights that that emerged from that work was one, really understand where the pockets of pressure are in your organization, right? Mm-hmm. The second is helping individuals become resilient, but in a very behavioral-oriented way and very, very practical. The next is wire it into the way you work, into the systems, right? And then don't measure the concept, but measure some of the causes. And if those causes are shifting one way or another. So to address each one of those very briefly, when we looked at where burnout or overwork was happening in the organization, we were able to really target interventions there. So one of the functions at IBM that suffered from high acute levels of burnout was the sales organization, right? That's not a big surprise. High pressure, quarterly, monthly, quarterly, annual targets, very high pressure. So we really did a lot of work to diagnose what that looked like and how it showed up in the sales function, which could be very different from the innovation team or other places where it might show up. So we literally met the sales team where they were. I was leading the L&D function at that time, so we were at sales conferences. We were designing interventions that we could just incorporate into their regular cadence, so it didn't feel like an add-on. Similar to that, we built very behavioral-oriented, action-oriented tools and techniques to help them build their resilience or really stop and reflect in real time. Of course, we had gorgeous digital bundles that anyone who wanted to go deeper could, but we created little cards that you could download onto your phone, stick in your backpack, to just remind us to just sort of to breathe, to practice gratitude, to reach out to someone to see if they needed help. Just little things, minor, micro activities we could do throughout the day. Another insight was around building resilience practices into the way we work. So our research found that actual bureaucracy was the main driver of burnout. So the friction that we experienced on a like hour by hour basis of getting our jobs done. Like IBMers were running into bureaucratic processes that really prevented them from just trying to achieve what they were there paid to be there to achieve. So we looked at, where was that friction showing up? How could we automate, simplify? And here's where I think the application of AI has a real human component. We can make the connection between AI and how it might help us thrive, right? To sort of reduce the fear that exists with AI. So where can we automate? Where can we leverage AI? Where can we simplify? How can we build into things like retrospectives? The discussion around where was the work that we just completed harder than it needed to be, and how can we level that? And then finally, measuring things like role clarity, tool adoption, new tool adoption, rather than, or in addition to, typical measures like engagement or short-term disability claims or burnout rates and stress levels. So I still think we have a lot of work to do on building resilient organizations, but those are some insights that our work in this space surfaced for us.
Thanks, Sally-Ann, and I see people nodding, so that's probably some of the things people are doing within their own organizations as well, which is nice to see.
Can I make
Did
a
you
comment
Absolutely.
on that? Yeah, so thanks for that. And I'll come back to what I said earlier about, building that culture of safety and ability to thrive is leadership's main responsibility. We don't need to get to a place of why are people burning out and why things aren't working if your leadership is operating at the level that they need to do. It is literally our job to create the culture and the environment where people can thrive. So, when people come to me and saying, "Oh, this person's burning out," my first question is like, "Okay, so what's going on? What are you doing as a leader?" It's your job to create this environment where this person doesn't get to that state. And so there are so many great solutions you put forward, but that is, again, I'll come back to this is the job that we have, is to create that culture where we don't get to that place.
Thank you. Geoff,
Yeah, and I loved everything you said and the build there, Sudha. One of the things that we implemented as a bit of training wheels in our organization was a program called We Care, and it was an opportunity for employees to with their manager every month put together a bit of their own diagnostic on how they were doing. Series of questions on just how they were existing in the workplace, and from that information, from that data, the manager could look at the data, because it was very open, and have a really good conversation about exactly that, right? That I care about you, I want to know more about, what's going on, how I can help, and make sure that you're coping okay. And it got to the point where that was the training wheels. We could take the training wheels off, and that habit or that behavior continued. So again, still work to do, but things like that, I think, exactly as you say, help to support people, especially in times like these where it's not just what's happening in the organization, it's a lot of what's happening outside the organization that is on people's minds. Yeah.
Thanks, Geoff. I like the concept of the training wheels.
Yeah.
Next question. What leadership competencies become more important, not less, in an AI-accelerated workplace? And I know, Sudha, you've touched on this a little bit, but I'm going to turn to Liz and give your perspective in terms of those leadership competencies.
I get the AI question. I wanted to start this and ground the AI conversation in a study that I recently came across. Whether you're looking, McKinsey has cited this, there's some other sightings of this, but does anyone know why 70 to 75% of technology transformation fails? Any ideas? I see some hands. Adoption. The people. We're getting close. It's leadership. 70 to 75% of transformation fails because of leadership. And so AI doesn't reduce the need for leaders, it augments it. And I think we've heard some examples of, in this time of continuous change, continuous disruption, where a lot of our leadership models are built off of stability and linear career progression and organizational models that really don't flex and change. we really do need to look at how we're developing and augmenting leadership in a world of AI and constant disruption. And now we're in a place where knowledge is no longer the currency.
Right.
Because I can have knowledge at my fingertips in a matter of seconds or minutes. But where I think the rubber really hits the road, and I was at a conference recently where Lance Armstrong was one of the panel speakers. And he said in his mind there are two AIs. There's the AI that we know, and then there's the augmented intelligence. And that to me spoke about what makes us uniquely human. How do we help people navigate through ambiguity, through change, resilience? How do we navigate the complex information that's coming at us, prioritize that information? And then, Geoff, you kind of alluded to that, is moving with momentum and pace. That is where we really need to double down on how we focus on our leaders. So we've been really purposeful at Zurich. We use AI in a lot of things in insurance. It might surprise you. I always get surprised at how advanced I think we're actually using AI. So we use it in claims and underwriting. We are a highly regulated, highly technical industry. If you have insurance, you know that you expect insurance organizations to safeguard your information. AI is not the decision maker for us. It augments the decision. And so it allows underwriters and claims professionals to synthesize vast amounts of data and render decisions using the things, again, that make them uniquely human. Their judgment, their ability to prioritize, their ability to make decisions, and then move at a pace that we need. Fail fast, learn quickly. And I think that's where we need to focus our efforts when we think about AI.
Thanks, Liz. Geoff, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I love that, right? In terms of, the whole judgment piece. Again, in my space, I get asked the question all the time, what are those core skills that I'm going to need for the future now that AI is really starting to take hold? So things like judgment and critical thinking, use AI as sort of the cat. I'm a big golfer, so the caddy, the person beside you that can help you understand, what is the data, and then you have to interpret it through that judgment and critical thinking. So we're, again, looking at trying to build programs to help people along those lines. I think and Sudha, you touched on it too, this whole human-centric influence, right? Like, where are we with empathy? There's a great book out there called The Empathy Advantage. If all of our leaders could really sink into that, I think the world would be an amazing place. And so that's something that I'm doing a lot of in the coaching work that I do, but trying to help along the trust building curriculum as well. And the other piece you touched on, I don't think we can say it enough, is learning agility. I actually did a talk here within our organization last week to people that were at the beginning of their careers, wondering where can I go in this new world. It's really daunting. You've seen the stats for people coming out of university, right? So we have a lot of that. We've grown quite a bit in Canada in the last 3 years, and I say to them, and I don't know if this is entirely true, but my gut and all the conversations I'm having head in this direction, which is if you needed a magic key for those future sort of skills that you're going to need over the next several years, learning agility is that skill, right? The ability to unlearn what you know today and relearn something new and do that on a continuous loop. Yeah.
And be okay with that.
Yeah.
And I love what you guys are saying because, the term encourage the heart. That's what we need of our leaders today and our future leaders, because as AI can do manual tasks, encouraging the heart and inspiring others, it cannot do. And that's where leadership comes into play the most.
Great. Anything else? Oh, sorry, Sally, you want to add something?
Yeah, I love, we're just like plus oneing everything. The learning agility, because it's like, yes. The learning agility that's been brought up so many times, I love that concept. It's a must-have. It's the learn it all, the Satya Nadella Microsoft learn it all mentality that he's shifting across his organization. And I think for leaders, the learning in public, like learning side by side with your teams, not sort of going behind closed doors, and then coming out an expert, but learning along with your team. I want to add to the conversation around the capability that is required of leaders in the AI world. Another one, which we're seeing across so many of our clients, is because AI is entirely changing the talent ecosystem and what the talent ecosystem looks like in our organizations, that it is knowledge is coming from anywhere. The concept of expertise is going to be entirely different. So leaders being enablers of that talent flow across the organization, which is going to feel really different. And we've talked for many years about leaders being the grower of talent. But now they need to be the exporters of talent, the enablers of flow. So identifying not just like who is the most senior person I can put on this project, but who's got the right skills, letting talent kind of come and go throughout your function. And as an enterprise leader, making sure that the whole leadership system supports the flow of talent throughout the organization, because the boundaries, the rigidity of skills and roles and functions is going to be no more. It's moving in that direction. So I would just add that as a leadership capability.
Thanks, Sally-Ann. And I think the concept of hoarding talent is one of those old thought processes we need to get away from. So I think that's really important. Next question. How are organizations preparing leaders for continuous change? And we've touched on this a little bit, but I think, where do current leadership development approaches still reflect assumptions about the old world versus the new world? So where do we need to shift actual development of programs in leadership to reflect our current reality? I'll turn that over to Liz. Do you want to comment on that?
Sure. I think I said it earlier. I think a lot of our leadership models are based off of old, antiquated, like we're working in a world of stability. COVID has probably been the first catalyst for change that we never saw coming, and frankly, I don't think the world's ever been the same since then. But I think we're trying. So what we're really thinking about at Zurich, the world is changing so quickly, and I think about our value proposition to our customers and brokers, and we're trying to develop products that enable resilience in our customers and brokers. If you think about insurance, we're there when you need us. Most of the time people think of the world of insurance as I have something bad happened and I have a claim and now I need your help. And it's not just about helping people in their time of need. It's about how do we help them be proactive and prepare for what's to come next. And we don't know what's to come next. And we think about how do we shift that to our employees, and we have to start with the leadership capabilities. So we're trying to move away from preparing people for the next role or that next career trajectory, because as you mentioned, that's kind of gone. I mean, Sheryl Sandberg wrote about it years ago in her book, the career ladder is now the career jungle gym. I think we need to come up with a different analogy now. It's probably the career matrix. But if we really think about how do we help leaders, so can we simplify governance? You talked about getting stuck in bureaucracy. We love a good governance model at Zurich. I mean, that's what we do. But it slows people down. And we are going through a massive transformation at Zurich, Canada, where we're asking people to do things we've never asked them to do before. We want you to operate with this white space. It's very undefined. We have very ambitious growth targets. We have a new operating model. We also have this different generation of employees coming in, and AI is disrupting how we develop our new underwriting associates and how that changes their work. And leaders they're feeling it too, they're human. And so how do we prepare them for ambiguity? How do we help them clarify decision rights and sort of move some of that bureaucracy out of their way? Either through just simplifying and getting real with ourselves around, do we really need 10 people to approve this? Yeah. Do I really need, we call them group, that's Zurich for us. Do they really need to tell us, our underwriting limits and authority, or can we empower countries to make those decisions on their own? And then how are we holding the leadership team accountable for the decisions that they make? You talked about that, Sudha, we tell leaders they're accountable for these things, but we don't actually hold their feet to the fire and measure that when we're talking about their performance and their development. And so I think kind of combining all of those things together, you really need to think about how you're developing those competencies for the future and how you're helping your leaders navigate the uncertain world.
Thank you. Sally-Ann, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, only to say, our evolution, I don't think our evolution has caught up with the moment that we're at. Like neuroscience tells us, we are not wired for unpredictability, right? And ambiguity. We're wired for predictability. And this is a cognitive load for all of us. And in fact, for our leaders the expectations are higher and higher. So just as for those of us who support our leaders in our organizations, they are leading something for which they feel unprepared as well. It's just there's an element of compassion that we need to bring, and presumably we all do, a sense of compassion for who we are as humans and how difficult all of this transformation is in such a condensed period of time.
Thanks.
Can I add
Sudha, do you
a
want to
quick
add on?
thing?
Go
Is
for
there
it.
time? It's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So such great points. I'm so excited being up here with you guys. So look, if you own the talent agenda, and I'm assuming many of us in the audience here do, at Interac, we don't just talk about talent. It's not one just event a year. As an executive team, as I said, we go off-site throughout the year. Talent is always a conversation that we have about current talent, future talent, and what we're doing for our pipelining and management development. Because as an organization, the burden or the privilege rather lies on the leadership at every level of the organization. So it's not a one-time event or two-time event. It's a constant conversation that we're having about talent, the skills, capability, and not soft skills, because we know soft skills are hard skills for people to have. And I will just share with all of you, for years now, I have removed that term executive presence when we talk about talent, because that is a term that has kept people out of the boardroom or out of the leadership table for years. So, I encourage all of you to remove that term, because leaders will like to say, well, she or he doesn't have executive presence. What exactly does that mean? Does that mean that they don't look like you, sound like you? Leaders comes in all shapes, forms, and sizes and personalities. And so, we talk about that really openly about what it means to be an Interac leader.
I love that. That's a great comment. I think it's important to think of it that way. I'm going to go to the next question, which really leads to one of your comments, Geoff, around all the young people coming out of university and how we're preparing them for this new reality of our workplace that's drastically different.
Thank God he's answering that.
So how do leaders need to rethink career development to support growth with roles, skills, and business needs that are continually evolving? So think about what are those career models we need to change, what no longer applies. And I'm going to let you kick that off, because I think you got a little bit of passion around that concept.
Yeah, it's a big question, and as I keep saying, like, it's all work in progress, right? We're trying to really figure it out. I think we do a lot of listening, which is good across all generations. With the new generations coming in, and even I'll go to a talk this week. It's called "The Future of Work is Gray." Interesting title. And gray being sort of that those last generations that are in the workforce, they're staying around and they have a lot to offer. And they have a lot to offer across those generations. So we're really taking a look at that and trying to study that a little bit more. But I would say you mentioned it, right? In terms of I've heard the term lattice, right? Like a career lattice. And many times we'll get people that they get in the organization, 6 months into the job, they're like, okay, it's time for me to get promoted, right? And we're like, that's not quite how it works.
Come on,
I've been
really?
there 33
Never
years,
heard
so-
that before.
Yeah, that's not quite how it works. And we have great conversations about that because, also in those roles, they'll be in them for a short period of time and they'll want to move, but there's still so much to learn there. And so we're really trying to talk about more of a growth culture versus a promotion culture, and even this whole thing around, does the word career continue in the future? With companies going away from roles, maybe away from titles, into skills-based, really predominantly skills-based organizations, and so again, we're really trying to understand how that will play out over time, and the key for us is just to ensure that people understand where those opportunities are. And I get asked this all the time, what are those core skills that, whether I'm in this job or this job or this job, those skills are really going to pay off for me? And I can learn the content. We can teach you the content, but those core, and I like your thought about executive presence, it's not that. There's probably 5 or 10 core leadership skills that if you have them, you can take your wisdom, your expertise, your experience anywhere. And so we're really trying to encourage that in terms of the development of our people.
It's interesting, this whole after 6 months they want to be promoted. I think that's not a new concept. I think that's been for generations. But I don't know in this current reality, how do you actually change that? Like, that isn't just a cultural thing. That's an expectation by generation. Like, how do you change that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's, I mean, I'm testing it in real time with people. And sometimes I get blank stares, but other times I get people nodding their head, right? I think ultimately, if you ask people what they want from their work life, they want to belong when they arrive. They're in a place where I fit, I belong. They want to have friends at work, right? They want to enjoy that experience, and they want to create and produce value and know that they're valued in the work that they do. And I think it is shifting, right? Those younger generations, they won't tolerate the crazy 60, 70-hour weeks that some of us have been working in our careers. They're like, no way. I need more. My daughter's 25 and she's a new lawyer, and I can see it already. She's like, no way. I'm not doing that. So I think helping them through that period and recognizing that you're coming with a bank of core skills, and that's your value, right? That's the kind of conversations we're having. And again, I'm testing it, and it seems to be resonating.
Good. Thanks, Geoff. Liz?
This is a topic I love to talk about. If you haven't figured it out, insurance is complicated. Did I say that? So we're trying to think about it from a learning experience perspective. So we all know the 70-20-10 model as we think about learning. We're honing in on that 70%, the 20%, and the 10%. When you think about the expectations of the changing workforce, insurance is a great industry, plug for insurance. It's a great, resilient career. It's pretty much recession-proof as an industry because we all need it in order to function in our daily lives. But it is also an industry that pays very well. And we have people coming in out of school who in 6 months are ready for the executive suite. They're ready, and they expect it. And why wouldn't we give it to them? But even if you go to school to learn the business of insurance, it is still a long ramp-up time to really become proficient. And depending on the line of business that somebody's working in, it requires even more expertise and in-depth knowledge. We were running up against a problem with our early career talent. At one point, we had about a 22% attrition ratio within the first 2 years of onboarding new grads into our world, because we would do a really great job at developing them, and then they would get picked off by our competitors because they were offering them the fancy job title. They still want the fancy job title, and they were getting more money. And so we really had to redesign our early career pipeline of talent. So we have a white collar apprenticeship program. We have a new onboarding, we call it an onboarding program for early career talent. So we're shifting away from the definitive program, to how do we create learning experiences over 18 months, over 2 years. And that plays out through all of our development programs in our business. What we also did to tackle the attrition rate was we put in, so there are very clear business metrics, business KPIs that are tied to the business. The work that they're doing is solving real problems for our business, so we're really focused on the solution that the business needs. And then we also put in performance metrics and evaluations every 6 months for the first couple of years. That has been enough of the carrot. Now, we just started it. We're almost a year in, so ask me in another year from now if I've been able to reduce that attrition. But it's also now allowed us to play with a concept we're calling, which is probably not our concept, it's out there, is dynamic resourcing. So how do we prepare people for that uncertainty and that sort of gray space, white space, and put them where we need the problems to be solved? And what that has also allowed us to do with these early career programs is there are occasions where we've matched someone. So it's not about your job title or your role. It's about the skill that we're trying to develop, the capability that we're trying to develop, and where do we need you to solve the immediate business problem. We have examples now of we've got senior vice presidents working alongside the early career talent to solve a problem in real time, find the solution, move on to the next thing. It's a great experience for your SVPs who have probably not touched that in a while and really get to see and experience how the front line is dealing with it. But what an experience for an early career talent to be able to work with someone at that level with that level of knowledge. And in the business of insurance, Yes, you can have AI that can synthesize all that data for you really quickly, but it does not replace learning from someone who's been doing it for 25 years. And that has allowed us to be able to be more agile as a business, shift to where the work is, solve the real problems, but also create a really strong value proposition for what people are getting out of their day-to-day.
Thank you. And I think back to the concept of judgment comes into that, getting that opportunity for the younger generations to work with seniors. Do you want to add to that?
Just one thing to add, I think you're sort of hinting at it, is this whole concept of talent marketplaces. And we've been experimenting a lot with that, and now formalizing it even more. But what an opportunity, I think. We're a 100,000 person organization. A lot of times we'll go external to try and find that talent, which, sometimes you need to do. But a lot of it is right in front of us. If we just truly understood the skills that people had, gave them the opportunities to develop those skills in different kinds of situations, and expose them, if they are thinking about lateral moves or vertical moves, to the opportunities that are there. And the managers love it because they can test them out, they can see how they respond in certain situations, and you can just feel the buzz in the organization when you do that properly.
So I can share that at Interac, we went from an 8-layer organization to a 4-layer organization. So if our CEO was considered N1, and then an N4. We are only 4 layers. So that this conversation about, growth, titles, promotions, we don't advocate for that. We advocate for skill development within the layer that you're in. Now, some people, that was pretty difficult for some folks in the beginning, right? Because they're used to that, manager or assistant manager, assistant director. We just don't have those titles anymore or those levels. So we are really focused on developing skill within the layer in, moving around the organization, right? Not just in your function, but in others to gain that experience. And, we are competitively highly paid in the organization. So as your skills develop over time, your pay will increase within the band or level that you're at. But it's not a title that they're getting. We're focused primarily and always on skill development.
Thanks, Sudha. I think that's an interesting part that both of you brought up. If we think about internal mobility, that seems to be a struggle for so many organizations. If you think about, we have the talent, but we don't actually know the skills we have in our talent, and how do we make sure we broadcast that or share that with the larger organization? And it's even more important if I think about the smaller organizations that some of you come from. You don't have the layers, you don't have 10,000 people to pick from. If you only have 900 in your case, Liz, how do you create that internal mobility? And I think that's a big struggle for a lot of organizations.
If I could just say something about that. So Zurich globally, and this is public, so I'm not sharing anything I'm not supposed to, we have a 75% ambition on internal fill rate globally. Now, internal fill rate is a bunch of things. It could mean we move people laterally, which we do. We promote people. We move them to different parts of the world because we're a global business. We convert students to full-time or contractors to full-time, or we rehire people, so the boomerangs that have left us and come back. But in order to do that, we need to put our money where our mouth is when it comes to development. And you're right, it can't always be about job title, because in Canada, we're a small business relative to our global colleagues. We only have so many layers. And when you're focused on developing for skill, when you're focused on helping people develop the skill set that they need, especially when we think about how unpredictable the future is. I mean, I think about when I first started in my career in HR, there was like one way up the career ladder. But my career is anything but. I have done so many things over the course of my career that I would have never even known existed. And by focusing people on skill development and preparing for the uncertainty of the future, it makes it way more interesting, and it allows the diversity of career that people can have that maybe they never thought about before.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to comment on that?
Just the one word maybe that we haven't talked a lot about that I think is a bit of a game changer, and is that word curiosity. How can you open your mind to the possibilities, right? And again, think about, wow, I never thought about going down that road. When I went from commercial to medical affairs, people said to me, nobody does that, right? And when I went from medical affairs to finance, some people said, nobody does that, But it was that curiosity, What does the business look like from all angles? And how can I continue to develop my skills and assert that value?
I think that concept of curiosity is so important. And I kind of imagine, let's say early career folks in our organizations are like up on stage 10, 20 years from now talking about their careers and how different and dynamic they look. Like our work will have been done if we have those kinds of leaders in years to come who started here, went there, build the skill, went backwards to go forwards. And I think something that I love on the curiosity theme that our early career employees teach us, it's like us being curious as well when they ask for like a meeting with the CEO, and your eye roll and you're like, well, that's just, that doesn't happen, or maybe it does. But if it doesn't, it's like, okay, let me hear that. Let me understand what's behind that. Is there something we should break and rebuild, based on the assumptions or expectations you're bringing to the workplace, So if we as well stop and think like, are they just being, annoying, or are they just trying to look at something in a totally different way? It's just that they're coming in with a different mentality. So I really love that. It's forcing us to get a little uncomfortable and look at where we need to shift and change.
So how do you create curiosity in people that you perceive don't have it?
You reward it, I think. I think all of the behavior change is around, what do you acknowledge, what do you celebrate and reward in the organization? So if a leader is wanting to take a bet and be a bit bold, is that rewarded, or is that sort of brushed under the rug and sort of hidden away? So it's like, where do you get public and celebrate those curiosity moments that win and also that fail?
Thank you.
I was going to add, we need to model it. That whole statement in meetings. There's no dumb question. Like, imagine how some people feel about that. They're like, no, I'm not going to ask that. But I think in before the discussion today, we were talking about vulnerability. Like, if our leaders can show that vulnerability, I don't know. That's why. Let's talk about this. Let's be thought partners with their people in their organization. I think that leads to people having the freedom and the safety to feel like I can ask those questions, and I'll get rewarded because I'll learn something, and the people around me will learn something because they were probably thinking the same thing.
Well, and I also think it ties back to your comment about accepting failure, and failure is a good thing to develop. If you allow failure not as a punishment for not being successful, but as a learning opportunity, you're more likely to create that. I'm going to ask the dumb question if it's perceived as dumb, which I think is really important. Liz, you want to add?
Yeah, I thought of an example when you were talking. So, we've been trying to say we want people to fail fast and learn quickly, and it's okay there's no dumb question. You can make mistakes, but you're talking about behavior change, and that's hard to do. And I wanted to tell you a story. As we embarked on this journey at the start of this year, we came out with these are all the things. These are all the behaviors that we want people to do. We want to celebrate. We want to reward. And I had a leader on my team who was, talking about the fact that it's okay to make mistakes and there's no dumb question. And one of their employees made a mistake, didn't do something exactly the way that the person wanted it to do. And it was something new that they were being asked to do. So in fairness to that person, and they hadn't worked with them before, they didn't quite get it right. And it wasn't something detrimental to society. It was something simple. And the manager got really annoyed and really frustrated with that employee and reacted in a way that they would have normally reacted. And I, as the observer and being the head of HR, felt the need to step in and pull the manager aside and say, hey, do you know what you just did? And I walked them through my observation. I called them out in that moment and said, here you are telling people to make mistakes and to fail and learn quickly. Instead of telling this employee, okay, this wasn't exactly what I wanted you to do, it kind of sucked, but here are some things that maybe we could do better, and then give that person the opportunity to try it again. That is where the behavior change comes in. And thankfully, this leader was very receptive, to a bit of the tough love and a bit of the feedback. But you're going to have to do that as people leaders over and over again, because as an old boss of mine at Unilever years ago taught me, the key to adult learning is repetition. You just got to keep hitting them over the head with it until the behavior change happens. But if there is a desire and a willingness and there's modeling from the top, it will change.
Thank you.
There's a great,
Go ahead.
if you guys are interested, there's a great podcast I just listened to yesterday, HBR IdeaCast, and it speaks to their latest article that's come out around strong teams, and it speaks to exactly that, right? Have that forward view mindset, right? That learning is an opportunity, or that failure is an opportunity to say, okay, it wasn't great, but what did we learn? And how can we apply that, next time? It's a powerful podcast.
That's my acronym, FAIL, from all I learn.
Nice, I like that. So one final question, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience for Q&A, because I'm sure there's lots of questions that people would like to ask. I'd like each one of you to think about, if for one little nugget that you want the audience to walk away with today, in terms of a practical application, whether it's developing talent, acquiring talent, or growing talent from a leadership perspective. What's the one thing you think people should consider implementing or applying in their organization? Small, large, any kind of organization. One little nugget. And I know I didn't prepare you for this question, so I'm going to give you a second to think about it, but anybody can jump in with that question, and then we're going to turn it to the audience.
I'll go first. I think preparing people, like being resilient. How do you prepare people to be resilient and adaptable? Because you can't predict what's going to happen today. You can't predict what's going to happen tomorrow. But if you can help develop those competencies, you're arming people with a skill set that allows them to be prepared for anything.
Thanks, Liz. Who else would like to go?
My mic's on, so I'll go. Create simulations. I love the concept of using simulations to learn, especially in an environment of so much uncertainty. So where you can put your leaders in designed experiments where they have to practice and build the muscle of acting in uncertainty, and give them the ability to practice that a little bit. So where you can design those things for your leaders to help them build that muscle.
Thanks, Eliane. Sudha or Geoff?
I'll come back to what I said about spending time together as a leadership team, because I think we know this leadership sometimes can be lonely. There's not a lot of people you can share what's going on with, and you've got your safe space with that team. And when you can do that as a team, you can call out each other's blind spots in a safe way, and you can only do that when you've built vulnerable trust with each other. So if you have a trusted relationship with your leadership team, and you're calling each other out on their blind spots, you can only help lead that organization even better.
Thanks, Sudha. Geoff?
There's probably 10, but
Okay, leave it to 3.
no, I'll leave it to one, because the one that I said it earlier, the one that really stands out to me, whether I'm speaking to people that just joined last week, or people that have been there 10 years or 30 years, as long as I have, or any level in the organization, it's have that open mind that I don't know everything. In fact, I don't even know half of everything. And I'm going to be really, really curious, no matter who I'm talking to. And I think when you lead with that, when you lead with curiosity, and you've probably seen it, heard it, I don't think we can understate it, because it opens up so much of our world, and it creates that trust. People become vulnerable, and great things happen.
Great. Thanks, Geoff. I'm going to turn it over to the audience for questions. I'm sure there's been things percolating since the conversation began. And who has the microphone? Do you have the microphone, Tim? Perfect. So Tim has a microphone, and we'll bring you a microphone so everybody can hear you. I'll open it up. Whoever has a question, just raise your hand, and Tim will come to you.
It's more obedient than you expected.
So we've heard a theme of progress over perfection and learning through failure. And Geoff, you also mentioned consensus as a decision. So how do these ideas interact in practice? And based on your experience, when does consensus actually lead to better outcomes, and where, you mentioned there's still room to grow in your organization. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, great question. Again, I think we're really trying to balance that. I think it depends a lot on what industry you're in, but certainly in ours, where we're trying to get it right every day. I think in some cases we do need that consensus. In other cases, we back it off quite a bit. I think from the leaders that I'm speaking with, developing that muscle of, we're not always going to get it right. And even I've heard, 15% of the time, let's see if we can fail, because through that failure, we're going to learn a ton through that experimentation. Look at it. We're a discovery-based organization trying to develop medicines to cure disease. If we didn't have that mindset of experimentation, right, testing hypotheses, learning from those failures, and I run a program called the Learning Lab, which, I think it took me 9 months to find anybody in the organization that would come and tell their story.
Oh, interesting.
But once they did, right, it was a scientific team to talk about where the project didn't go right, where they failed, where they made wrong, and in some cases it cost a bit of money, right? But once that team came forward and made it okay to have that conversation, and the conversation that happened in the moment when they shared their project and what happened, the floodgates opened. People said, okay, well, let's talk about this, because we can learn from each other. And so it takes time, but I think we're on a good path to people being more open about that, and recognizing that if you do want to move at pace in a quickly changing world, that 80% in many cases is good enough.
And if I may,
Go
I
for it.
think
Sudha.
consensus is it's a great topic, because you need consensus, you need collaboration, but what you don't want is for consensus to slow down a process, right? Because we are all meeting heavy, and we don't want another meeting because we need to get consensus, so we got to move in an agile way. So you have to have an understanding that we'll try to get to consensus, and if we don't, we're going to disagree but commit. Right, because we've got to move an initiative forward or a project forward. So we'll have the discussion, and then whoever owns that, whatever piece you're working on, we'll have to disagree but commit. And I think that needs to be seen and felt in the organization. Not that you have these sidebar convos like, oh, I didn't really agree to that, but we're going forward anyways. You know what I mean? Like, you just can't do that. It ruins a culture. Mm-hmm. So I think consensus is important, because you got to collaborate to run a business, but then you got to disagree and commit, because otherwise it can be very bureaucratic to get to anything.
The other thing I would add too is it's not like you need a bit of structure around that too. How are decisions made? Who's making a decision, right? What is our culture and the kind of norms that we have in place to allow that to move forward? Because if you practice it or you put it in play, and and people aren't bought into that process, then that can slow you down, because it just takes more time.
Thanks, Luke. Great question.
Thank you. Great conversation. I want to pick up, if I can, on the theme of leadership and vulnerability. Many of the panelists have talked about that, and I'm curious to learn from you. Often leaders are scared to be truly vulnerable because of the perceived risks, especially if you're thinking about the CEOs of an organization. I'm curious how you've seen success in them being vulnerable in really moving the dial in an organization.
Are you okay if I
Whoever
go
would like
first?
to take that, go for it, Sudha.
I love this question, because it's such a key strength of any leader, and I can share my own CEO's example. Has talked very openly about mental health struggles in his family, and other leaders like myself and on our executive team have done the same at town halls, not just on one-on-ones, but on town halls. And we like to say as a leadership team at Interac that we lead with humanity, not hierarchy, because we show that we are real human beings. I have shared openly about using EAP for myself and for my family many times growing up as a young mother when we needed help like that, right? So I think when you share those examples, and as I said, my CEO has, and many of us have at the executive team, it just brings everyone together, that we're all just people, We're all just people. And with vulnerability, you gain that trust, and again, builds that culture of understanding and safety.
I always try to applaud people for doing that, even if they're the CEO, because it takes a lot of courage to admit if you've made a mistake, to admit you don't have the answer to something, to admit that you're struggling with something. And so my advice to you, I'm going through now another CEO change. I had a previous boss before, I have a new boss. They have two totally different styles. But what I found is they're both very open to how do I show authenticity to people. But I've got a new CEO who's brand new, and brand new to being a CEO, by the way, never been before. So if you can think about the pressure that person is under to be perfect, but while telling all of the rest of us it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to fail. And so developing that trust is so important, especially if you're in like an HR business partner role where the relationship you have with your leader, whoever that leader is, whether it's a line manager all the way to senior executive, is so important because you become that trusted advisor to them, to be almost that canary in the coal mine. Like, how do in my role, I lead all of HR, but I'm also the HR business partner to the CEO. So I need to be able to tell them when, how I think things are going. I need to be able to give them the real deal. And if I can't do that, I'm not doing my job. What I've often done, I've supported several CEOs over the course of my career. You have to meet them where they're at. If you have CEOs or leaders, again, it doesn't matter the title. If it's someone who's a leader who needs to show up more authentically, try to test it out in smaller spaces. Have them test that out with maybe a one-to-one conversation with somebody that they already feel comfortable with or they already trust. And then grow that into, maybe then you can share it at an executive team meeting to build that psychological safety on the team. And then maybe more broader with the organization. Or there's a huge power in leaders just walking the floor. We've all told everybody to get back into the office. So let's walk the floor. Let's talk. Let's have real conversations. When I worked in Unilever, I worked in an ice cream factory in Las Vegas. That's a whole other panel. But I worked for a leader of our factory. He was Dutch, and he was probably one of the most authentic leaders I've ever worked with. We had a factory of almost 400 people, and he knew every single person's name. He knew their stories. You talked earlier, Sudha, about being able to say, how is the family doing or how are your kids doing? I marveled at how he knew that someone had just bought a car, and this person's kid just went to college. But that authenticity permeated throughout the organization, and it allowed people to see the modeled behavior, and that showed up in everyday behaviors of everybody on the floor. So start small if you have to, but the more they can do that, the more they can model the behavior themselves, the more you will see that permeate throughout the organization.
And vulnerability can be fun too, right? It's just showing, what you're not great at. Because I can tell you, me and my CEO were asked to be in a karaoke competition at work. He sucked. I was really good. But, right? Not a competition, but I kind of won, so. But he was not good. But he's like, all right, I've never done this before, but I'll do it, So you can show up in any way to show that, I'm going to try this and participate.
And one last thing to add is just and I think Lizzie sort of touched on it there, is just that culture. Like culture's hard. It is everything, but it's hard too, right? If you're trying to shape something in a certain way, back to the question on vulnerability, I think it starts there. I think it starts exactly as you said, by walking around. People come into our offices in Mississauga from all over the world, from our sites all over the world, and they go, I don't know what's going on here, but we'd love to bottle that. Because you can hear the laughter, you can hear the discussion, you can feel the vibrancy. And it's because our leaders are in the midst, walking around, having those conversations. So when it comes time to be truthful and open and honest and vulnerable, they do it.
I like that.
Yeah, I one thing on this, because we're all very passionate about this topic. Vulnerability traditionally hasn't been part of the high performer's playbook, right? You're not vulnerable if you're a high performer. I think we have to tie the ability to be vulnerable as a leader to high performance. That is how we get there. We don't get there any other way. So I think that's another element.
I like that. A metric that's not KPI in terms of numbers.
Yeah.
It's great.
Feel it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next question.
Good morning. Thanks for the thought-provoking stuff we were talking about today. You really got me thinking around, is career important in the future, and perhaps it's skills. So the one thing I was curious about is we talked a lot about the new leadership competencies, new things we need to learn. I'm a student of the fact that the one thing that prevent people from learning is this concept called cognitive fixedness, which basically says that people are too set in their ways and they need to stop thinking about the things that make them successful so that they can start learning things faster. So the question I have is, we talked a lot about the things we need to learn, leadership things. What are the things that you feel we need to unlearn in order for us to get to that pace of learning faster?
I would think it's about the fixed mindset. You know, this is when people think about this is the only path. This is the only. I should look this way, dress this way, act this way, behave this way, because there's a model that they're following and not being their authentic self, right? So, it's a great question. I don't know if we can answer it all here, but I'll look to my colleagues up on stage here. But I think it's all about the fixed mindset, right? And moving from that to a growth mindset. And not everyone can make it. Right? We know that. We've seen that in business. Not all leaders can get there. Not all individuals can get there. But it's curiosity will get you there when you're open to other perspectives and you're open to different ways of learning and different ways of being, and being true to who yourself. You're not modeling somebody else. It's what's my way.
And I would add, I think, how can we create the environment for that change? You know, AI, right? Like we were bold and put a ton of AI tools into the people's hands and help them. You know, we need to be AI literate. You know, by the end of the year, kind of directive. But the change management piece up front, you know, we forgot about that. Like that's so critical to that. So some of the things we're trying to do is, I think you touched on it too, Liz, the 70-20-10 rule. That 70% is experiential. Get people in the setting where they're making those mistakes. Yeah, it's scary at first, but if we're making them together, then we're human. That's what happens. And then from that, you know, understand how is this going to shift my thinking in the future. We're also experimenting a lot with simulation, so doing a lot of business simulation and using simulation where you can speed up decision making. Right? You take it from 2 years down to 2 days because of the simulator, and that helps people, you know, fail in a controlled environment, know that they can do that, and then realize, wow, there's a lot I can learn here, and some things I really need to change if I'm going to continue to be progressive, relevant, valuable, right? With an incredibly fast-paced, dynamic world.
And I think it's about modeling the way as well. You touched on this. As leaders, we have to model the way. And you know, I would say about 15 years ago, I probably had a fixed mindset about texting at work. And I remember one of my directs was texting me, and I said, oh, you know, hey, just so you know, I don't text for work. I text for personal. Use Slack or use whatever, but don't text my cell phone. And then I realized, okay, these are millennials. I'm a Gen Xer. I have to meet them where they are as a leader. This is how they communicate, you know? So we created a group chat. Again, this is like 15 years ago. I'm like, okay, you know, I have to change and meet them where they are. So we've just got to model the way. I think about myself as a mother. You know, there's great things I took from my parents. I learned those values are there. But there's a lot of things that I parent differently, right? Because we all transform as we grow. Who I was yesterday is not who I am today.
The other thing I'll add is the power of observation. So for people who are stuck in what do I need to unlearn, or maybe they don't even know, I've tried to coach people where I've got people who are lacking a bit of self-awareness. Now, if they're completely lacking self-awareness, good luck. And if you figured out how to crack that one, please call me because I'm struggling with that. But most people want to do the right thing, right? Most people, if we're, most of our cultures, like find me a culture that's not evolving, find me a culture that's not transforming or changing to some extent. I want to believe that most people show up to work and they want to do that, but they're stuck. And so I've also tried to encourage people through the power of observation. I've sort of pointed out a couple of individuals that I think that person, maybe they're similar in role, similar in level, or I know that that person might have respect for those people. And if those people are doing it well, I've said, do you see how they're, and it's not just like watch what they do. Focus on specific behaviors that you're noticing that that person maybe is struggling with, and say, hey, Sudha does this really well. If you've noticed, when she does X, Y, and Z, she does it this way. So you can point out how the behavior is, and then, I always tell people, especially earlier career folks, people love to talk about themselves. So if you want to book a coffee chat with someone and say, what do you do? How do you navigate your career? Find me a person that says no to that. Like, people really love talking about themselves, so they can help build relationships. It builds their network. It allows them to have a trusted relationship, and it's the power of observation is really helpful. The other thing that we're doing, so where you've got people, we've all got those high introverts in our organization that's like, I don't want to talk to another person, I'm scared, I don't want to be vulnerable. We're experimenting with an AI coach for people leaders. So I'm sure all of us use ChatGPT. Some of us may or may not have given our ChatGPTs a name. I'm not saying names in the room, but AI is a comfortable place to talk to people or talk to someone or however you personify your AI. So we've created an AI coach for people managers, and it is a safe space for people managers to go in and say, I'm struggling with how to have this difficult conversation, or maybe I'm struggling myself with, I'm noticing a lot of my colleagues are showing up this way, and I'm not doing it. What am I missing here? And that could be another safe space for people to use. The good thing about the tool that we've created is it's a very safe space. It's got the privacy around it, so we're not putting stuff out in the universe that we shouldn't be putting out. But those are two suggestions I would give.
I love your thought about observation too. The next step on that we practice a little bit is, I'm working on something, so I'll say to someone I trust or a colleague as we go into this meeting, can you watch me? Can you watch for this? Yeah, accountability partner. And so they give you real feedback right after. It's right in the moment, and you can practice in a real live setting. It's perfect.
Like that. Great question of what to unlearn. The other part that I'd add to the fixed mindset is the scarcity mindset. I think kind of goes hand in hand with that fixed mindset. Thank you. Great question. Do we have time for more? Oh, she's got a microphone.
Yeah, I
Great.
stole it. It's a good strategy. Thanks for this good conversation. I want to ask from a slightly different perspective. We talked a lot about empathy and certainly about resilience and how to build that in employees. You've talked about our leaders needing to demonstrate authenticity and vulnerability. So in the climate that we have, and I don't mean just in our companies, but in the world, where there's just an awful lot, it's more than uncertainty. It's disruption, it's scary, it's a distraction. And if you have a diverse workforce like we do, you've got people in your organizations who are really worried about what's going on in the Middle East or in the US or in Ukraine. How are you equipping your leaders to either speak to this or give a nod to it? Are you speaking about it? Or are you just saying we're going to build resilience? Because I know it's tricky, but I'd be really interested to know what you're actually doing with your leaders in that space and how you're talking about it.
I would say that this is a place where I guess since COVID and then soon after, with all of the political, socioeconomic, global factors we're dealing with, where we saw experimentation happen and mistake making around this happen in real time. Leadership commenting on one tragedy and not another, or one conflict and not another, and the alienation that some employee groups, all of that. I think it's aligning to the values of the company without sounding too, but going back to what we stand for and what we're about and what we're here to do, and having some, as an executive leadership team, coming up with an approach, guardrails that we stick to until we have to reevaluate, right? And being really clear about that with employees. Like, this is the space, either this is the space where we can have those conversations, or this is a space where we prefer not to have those conversations, right? But just being clear about what we stand for on that. I think where employees, feel, a bit of whiplash is where there's inconsistency. So you kind of decide on an approach and you stick with it, and then adapt and be very transparent about that. We kind of went with this approach, and here's why. We're shifting slightly, and here's why. when you create that, I've seen both positives and negatives come from creating spaces for employees to talk about global issues. That could lead to sort of further animosity. It could also lead to coming together. I just want to acknowledge that it's a very, very difficult space to navigate for leaders right now. So, excellent question. I don't know if you all have.
It looks like I think everybody wants to comment.
Yeah.
I mean, when we talk about the concept of DIEB, in everything that you've already said, you have to be clear on what your approach is, how your culture shows up. We experience the same thing. Like if you comment on one thing, are you commenting on the next thing? So it's equipping leaders with the right tools to have the right conversations. That psychological safety cannot be overstated in an organization. What I would add to that is where we've leaned in on pick a topic, right? Because there's so much going on in the world, and there has been so much going on in the world. We leverage our ERGs a lot. They are such a powerful part of our organization. There are different communities within our ecosystem in Canada. We're extremely proud about how we've created that space for people, and it's allowed people to have safe conversations and safe environments with people who get what they're going through. And we equip our ERG leaders and our ERG teams with the right information, the right speaking points. We do training, we do sessions for them to develop their capabilities as leaders, because they show up for their community in ways that sometimes someone else can't, because they don't have the lived experience or the shared experience. And that's really important, to have that community culture within your organization, because it is a safe space for people to want to go to. And then don't underestimate all the things we already have. Your EAP, your mental health support, all of the benefits that you can offer employees. It really is, it's an ecosystem when it comes to supporting employees through these times that are so unprecedented. I thought I would stop saying unprecedented times after COVID, but the world just keeps surprising us of what's next. So, yeah.
Geoff, you want to add?
To all of you, thank you for these great questions. You're really helping us think through some things in some real depth, right? And currently, what are the key issues? And I think you're right. COVID's a great example. I thought coming out of that, it would be clear to all of us, the importance of what we all share. 8-10 billion people on this planet, and the fact that we're all human. And that humanity being so critical to those conversations. And so in some cases it's happened. I think in other cases it hasn't. But we're trying to encourage that dialogue. I think where we get a little gray is, where does that line end from an organization's responsibility and so forth? I don't know if it does necessarily, because it's such a blend. We learned that from COVID. Life and everything happening outside the organization, everything happening inside the organization are blended. So if we can provide the environment where we do have those open dialogues, we are caring, we are human. Those are some of the things we're trying to equip and train. And I mentioned the We Care program. We're trying to do that with our leaders.
Such a great point. The ERGs, we do the same. The only additional thing I will add is that, of course, there's that personal relationship you have with your first level manager and skip level, and we're a 1,000-person organization, so it's easy to get to know everyone and know everyone's pets' names as well, because it's a smaller company. We punch above our weight at Interac. You think we're 100,000 people. We're only actually 1,000 people. But what I will say is that at all hands and town halls, what we will say as a leadership team, again, because if you take a position, it could be a position against someone else, so we stay away from that. But we will remind everyone that everyone is going through something, and everyone needs some grace. So have some grace with your colleagues, because you don't know what they're going through, whether it's socio-political, health-wise. So give each other some grace, and we just remind everybody that at every town hall.
That's nice.
And maybe the other thing to add, as you talk about that, Sudha, is you mentioned leaders. I don't know if it is leaders. It's community. It's all of us. It's all of us. You see somebody at the coffee station, you can tell that they're a little off that day. Just be there. Be that support. I think if you can create that kind of setting, then it doesn't have to fall on the leaders necessarily. It's all of us, because we care about each other.
Well, it impacts everybody, not just the leaders, for sure. Thank you. Another question here.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for your thoughtful comments this morning. It's a very inspiring event. I wanted to pick up on some of the comments around resiliency and burnout that were mentioned earlier. I'm with Mental Health Research Canada, and we track the mental health of Canadians quarterly and rapid report on that in partnership with Health Canada. And our data consistently shows that the mental health of Canadians has not returned to pre-pandemic levels. And our data also shows directly from employees that one of the best ways you can support employee well-being is to provide flexibility. That is the number one opportunity that is cited as how my employer can best support me. And you've mentioned the complicated world we live in. We are trending negatively with many of those things. We are trending negatively with mental health. And I'm just wondering if that concept of flexibility, beyond many other supports that workplaces can provide, if that resonates with you as experts in people leadership.
So I'll kick it off. I'm sure everyone has something to say about this. So is everyone here hybrid, or is anyone in a 5-day back to work? Who's hybrid? Hybrid. Okay, so some hands. So when I started at Interac Corporation, it was hybrid, but come as you like. So that means no one came in, right? My CEO said, Sudha, can we have a return to work mandate? I said, we sure can. We're an agile organization and fairly young workforce. Folks, we work in squads. So our mandate is actually 3 days a week. But what I will tell you is that we're very intentional about it. People have agency in how they decide that they want those 3 days to work. So, my kids are adults, 27, 25. I don't have to rush home for anyone anymore. So that looks different for me than for a young parent or someone who has elder care that they have to get to. So they have agency in how they decide they want that hybrid to work. We don't badge swipe. I've been asked to by some leaders. I said, if you need to badge swipe, you got something else going on in your function there that we need to address. People have to have agency in how they decide they want that to work for their own flexibility. Flexibility looks different for different people. And yes, sometimes people come in 3 days, sometimes they come in 1 day, sometimes they don't come in at all. But over time, that all averages out because we measure outcomes, right? What is the outcome that person has to deliver? We trust that they have to get there. They will figure it out. They have the support of their manager and the function and the organization to get there. And I think that flexibility is so key, and they need to decide what works for them. Not the company say, it has to be Tuesday, because we're all in on Tuesdays. It has to be this. That doesn't work for everybody. If your kid's baseball game is Tuesday afternoon and they got to leave early, or that's their mother's doctor's appointment on Tuesday afternoon, right? So people have to have agency and decide how they want to work.
So we're 3 days a week as well. We do have designated team days. We've just implemented 2, but we have a lot of flexibility in how people need to flex. And we've said 3 days in office or in market. So there's a few people in the room from Zurich. We are in market today, this morning. But one of the things that we've done around, because we're insurance and we love a good story around data, I bring data to these executive meetings around we're measuring the impact of flexibility on our employees. We gather that not through a specific question of, how is the work-life balance impacting. We look at our engagement scores, we look at our upward manager feedback, and we look at our attrition data. And I bring that into the conversation with executives when my executives start talking about, okay, so we do monitor badge swipes, but we don't over micromanage it, but we look at the data, because again, we love a good data story in insurance. But if we see the averages are not quite where we want them to be, we have the conversation around the leadership's role in talking to your people and finding out what's going on. But one of the really cool things that we found out fourth quarter of last year, when we put all those data points together, I was able to go to the executive leadership team with a story around the impact disproportionately to a demographic of the workforce that more than 3 days a week could do. No surprise. It was women of a certain demographic with children of a certain age, or elder care on the other end. Mm-hmm. And no slight to the men in here, because I'm sure you all do a lot in the home, but research tells us disproportionately the bulk of responsibilities fall to the women in the house. And that was really insightful data points. So first of all, data doesn't lie. So it's a great opportunity to be able to tell the story to people who might not get it. When I talk about that, like shared experience, lived experience, it's from a DIEB perspective, and you think about it from gender or through other things, other lenses, being able to tell people who don't quite understand, because they don't have to worry about that. They don't have to worry about their commute to work because maybe they have a driver or they walk to work, but there's the rest of us who commute on a GO train. When you present them with data, it helps them frame that ability to be empathetic. And that has helped us shift the narrative on like being really strict about it versus giving the flexibility. And then I would also say, look at your benefits offerings. What are you offering people to manage the different challenges that they have in their life? And then how are we helping to educate the leadership in your workforce around having those good conversations with people?
Look, we're a laptop culture. It's easy for us to be flexible and have a hybrid. If you're not in a laptop culture and you're manufacturing, there's other things organizations can do, like flex days, wellness days, increase your benefits for mental health. There's lots of ways to have flexibility for people to work on their wellness, I think.
The other thing I'd add is, and I'd love to speak with you afterwards, just around why is it? Why is flexibility so critical to people? I mean, there's some obvious things that I think we immediately jump to, but I lead a lot of our people and culture work, and I remember presenting to our executive on some of the plans that we had in place, and I got stopped dead in my tracks because the first consideration, one was around recognition. Are we recognizing people for the effort that they put in? But the other was around workload. And so before we could do anything, we had to understand how do we manage that so that people aren't feeling like they're overwhelmed. And maybe that's where the flexibility piece comes from. But if they can come to work, and we're the same 3 days a week, but if they can come to work in those 3 days and feel like they can manage that pace, then that variety of having that flexibility, I think, becomes even amplified, even more helpful.
One more thing on that. When COVID hit and we all were like scrambled to our home offices, and team leaders and managers had to figure out how to like on the fly really quick with probably lots of good support that was developed in that moment. But almost instantaneously, we had to learn how to lead teams and achieve results with everyone distributed. And now we're sort of more or less hybrid. I still think that training for team leaders and managers is really important because there's biases that show up when we're distributed, the implications for culture and how do you build culture with a team you see in person less frequently? How do you manage performance? How do you manage different styles, introverts, extroverts, right? So there are ways that, we just have to get better at teaching ourselves and our teams about how to optimize both for the human component of being distributed or in person less, and providing that flexibility and understanding where some of the trade-offs are. But it's heartbreaking to know that mental health, just the statistic you started with is, boy, that's a hard thing to hear, but probably not a surprise. So thank you.
Thanks, Sally Ann. Thank you. And I don't think we have any more time for questions. Tim? We're good. Very good. So I'd like to close and thank our panelists for a very thought-provoking conversation. I think we could talk for a while on that. So thank you, everybody, and thank you for coming. We'll still be here if there's any questions or comments for the panelists as we close, but thank you very much for coming. Just one thing I'd like to comment on, if anybody has an interest. We do have some executive C-suite research that has come out, and we do have a webinar happening on April 28th, on Tuesday, April 28th at 10 a.m. around the executive imperative. Has some overlap to this from a stats perspective, but if you know any of the LHH folks in the room, connect with them and they can definitely share some information about that upcoming webinar next week. But thank you all for coming out today. Take care.